Hello, and welcome back. So today's game started off a bit different from what I'm used to with the French defense. I don't get to see this one very often, but we ended up playing the delayed exchange variation, which looks like this, which we then exchanged, and I brought out my queen to threaten his king. Obviously, he can't capture this and make me double stack my pawns because his king is in check. So normally in this position, someone will just bring out their knight, which this guy did. Next, of course, I didn't want to get my pawns double stacked or to just have this pin exist. So it was pretty key to put my bishop to d2 and protect against that. He then castled. And I wanted to make sure that this bishop didn't get to stay there. So just moved my pawn to a3 to be able to kick him off. He ran away, which is not great because it's still a threat, but at least my king isn't in that line anymore, so it's acceptable to have there. He just continued by developing his bishop. In this move, I was quite proud of myself for figuring out just put him up there. He can't recapture because my queen is threatening him. So he will have to either move back, at which time I will just keep moving up more pawns to threaten him, or he'll have to go back to where he came from. He ended up doing that. So I moved my pawn there. So next turn, I'll be able to move it here. I think the engine wanted me to move this pawn instead, which I don't know, similar end result. Just next turn, I'd be able to move it up there, and he would have to run somewhere along here, probably going here, just making us trade. Anyway, so this is what happened. That he then decided to trade his bishop for my knight, which I was happy to do because I always prefer having bishops. He then moved his bishop into e4, thinking he was clever, threatening my rook, but really it just made me take the choice of would I rather trade a knight and end up with my queen there after he takes, or move my bishop in here and trade bishops, which is what ended up happening. Next, he decided to move up his pawn. And I'm guessing that the engine here probably wanted me to capture. Yep. But instead, I wasn't really too worried about that yet. I wanted to keep moving up my pawns to threaten his king. Which involved, of course, developing my knight to have these squares protected. And if he decided to capture, I would just put my bishop here and I'd have a nice line. So I wasn't really too worried about his pawn being there. Yeah, for the next couple moves, I don't know, the computer just really wanted me to take that extra pawn, but I wanted to go for the king. So as I expected, he captures, I captured with my knight, because if I were to capture with my bishop, he would then take the bishop, but I really like having him there, especially because he's threatening this g7 pawn. And also I have a bit of a discovered attack, which I always like having. I almost gave away what I was getting to there. Okay, so then I continued developing. Computer just wanted me to develop on this side. I chose this side because I wanted to, well, next move when I'm able to move this here, he would have to move his knight out of the way or just give it to me for free. And I thought most likely he would capture, leaving this file open for my queen and letting me bring in my bishop next turn, capturing that and having a nice threat on the king. So he ended up moving there. And that, I think, is the move that kind of won me the game, because then I got to do exactly what I was just talking about, moving my pawn to f6 and threatening both his knight and his g2 or g7 pawn. Next, he did me a bit of a favor and let me open up that file, which included threatening his queen and his, oh, and his knight at the same time. Now, I can see what he was thinking here. He just wanted to have the rook and queen on the same file, because if he brings queen over to c2, that could be checkmate. But thankfully right now, I do have my queen protecting that. So he ended up giving me the free knight. And so he came to threaten my pawn. I wasn't really too worried about it, but I did want to develop my knight or my rook from that h1 square. I didn't really like it there, so it gave me the perfect opportunity to develop. And after a few more moves, in this position, I spent a long time thinking, because there was a lot of different lines that I could do, and a lot of them seemed to screw me over in about 4, 5, 6 moves. So the one I ended up going with, after a lot of it, if you'd like to pause and try to figure it out, go ahead. It's a lot more basic than you'd think from a move I'd spent a minute and a half thinking about. All I did was just move my bishop back, because I was expecting the line which ended up playing out of he threatens my bishop, I capture with my pawn, he recaptures, I recapture, and then I'm able to move back here, and my bishop, it will be entirely safe. And I still, of course, have my queen protecting that weak c2 pawn, so I don't get checkmated. So that all kind of goes as expected. He then moves that in, and this is another position that I spent quite a bit of time thinking about, seeing if there's any way I could like trade queens or get a another queen and force trades using that. So I ended up capturing the pawn with my rook, and of course he can't recapture, because then I take with this. He can't put me in checkmate, of course, because it's not checkmate. So he responded by just not knowing what to do, and he did that. And this kind of won me the game, because I was able to move my rook there, and he resigned after seeing this position. Now, if you'd like to stop and think about this position for a sec, black has to give up at least a rook, no matter what he does, really. So his two options here, well, I guess technically 3. But his options are to move his king out of the way, to capture my rook with his queen, or with his rook, or move his queen in the way, which would just be giving me a free queen. So the best line I was able to find from here, from his perspective, would just be like, I guess not capturing that, but moving king out of the way, so I would be able to capture, he'd probably recapture, and net I get a free rook. So I'm up, I've got 2 rooks and a bishop, he just has a rook. I'm about to get another queen, so it's a pretty unwinnable position for him, and that is why he resigned.